Hi class, we're going to take a look at one more example and then we will be done with this section. So here we go. Looking at the bead company again, they now have 150 pounds of turquoise beads and they think they sell 8 pounds every day. And so they're asking students to fill in the table. And again, you notice the two different kinds of thinking we talked about in the initial video. We have this student who is subtracting 8 each time and then pulling this number down and subtracting 8 again and subtracting this down and so on. And so they're subtracting 8, subtracting 8, subtracting 8. So you might be tempted to call this like subtractive reasoning or something, but that's not what's used. We call this additive reasoning still. It's just the way of thinking of each time doing the same process and not using the shortcut of multiplication. Where you see this person over here is using our multiplicative reasoning. You can see that they're taking the 8 pounds of beads each day times the number of days. 8 pounds times the number of days, 8 times the number of days. So, which would be more useful for making an expression with a variable, and why? Go ahead and pause it and see if you can articulate answers to both of those questions. I think it would be more useful to use the multiplicative because in here we see the value that is varying. This value is varying. So in this case, the variable, we're going to let d equal the number of days that have elapsed or passed. And so the expression for how many beads are left is 150 minus 8 times d. And I did switch it around here. Now, what happens if a student is doing this? Or what happens if you're working on variable expressions and your students are struggling to come up with the variable expression? It's probably because they're doing this when they think about it and not this. So I would encourage you not to say, hey, this is bad, you're stupid, don't do that, do this instead. I know you would never say it like that, but sometimes that's the way it comes across as, oh, that's not right, do this instead. What I would encourage you to do is really work with a student one-on-one and say, okay, this is great, you're doing great. What I want you to do is I want you to try to write an expression for number 2 without using 142. Instead of using 142, use 150 minus 8. So in this line, just think about what you did. You took 150 minus 8, and you know that's 142. And so now we're going to take that, and we're going to subtract 8 again. And you can type it in your calculator, you can see, oh yeah, that works. That gives me 134. Now, I'm going to challenge you to do the next line. In the next line, you can't use 142 or 134. And hopefully they see, okay, well, I know that this is 134, so I'm going to do 150 minus 8, and then I'm going to subtract another 8. And hopefully after they write this out a few times, they can start to see, hey, there's a shortcut here. And that shortcut is I could take 150, instead of subtracting 8 5 times, I could just take 5 times 8 and see, okay, in 5 days they're going to use 40 beads and then subtract once. And that will help them to see the structure of the problem instead of just focusing on subtract 8, subtract 8, subtract 8. So here we've gone over again another variable expression, looking at multiplicative versus additive, and I've kind of demonstrated one way of helping students move from additive to multiplicative.